there, spooky friends. I hope everyone is having a fantastic October right now, or should I say a spooktacular October right now. Very cheesy. Anyway, okay, so let's get to today's review, which is The Shining and its sequels. So, let's get to these gems. So, in 1980, The Shining comes out. And Rotten Tomatoes gave this film 84, which I totally disagree with, but we all know how Rotten Tomatoes is. And so here's what it is about, in case you didn't know. Jack Torrance, who is played by Jack Nicholson, one of my favorite actors, becomes winter caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel in Colorado, which is actually the Stanley Hotel, hoping to cure his writer's block. So he moves his wife and son in as well and tries to get settled in. As the winter grows, Danny, his son, becomes plagued by premonitions. As Jack's writing is going nowhere and Danny's visions become disturbing, Jack soon discovers the hotel's dark secrets and begins to mentally unravel into a homicidal maniac hell-bent on terrorizing his family. Now, a lot of people said that, there was a hidden meaning in this film, that, winter makes people go mad because they are trapped inside. When, the winter is very harsh and they can't get out, they can't do anything. And the same happens when we went into quarantine, the same thing. But I feel like, at least when we were quarantined, you could go outside and enjoy the outdoors. But here, when there's winter, a lot of people become depressed anyway. They call it seasonal depression. A lot of people's depression comes out more in the winter time. And so people, always thought there was hidden meaning in this, that Jack secretly had mental illness, and it was the winter. It was a harsh winter. They were trapped in there, and he just lost his marbles. All of that led to it, instead of just simply looking at it as a horror film. It was directed by Stanley Kubrick. What do you expect? Anyway, so this movie is creepy. It is action-packed. It is scary, and it is definitely a cozy movie for me. Now, I do want to say that Danny starts having premonitions before they get into the inn. The hotel, the Overlook Hotel. It just becomes even more disturbed and more often once they get into the Overlook. And it is kind of slow in the beginning, but the action, once they get to the Overlook Hotel, the action picks up and it just stays with action after that. And it's just very suspenseful and intense. Very, oh my goodness, yes. I can't imagine watching this film in the movie theater. I think I would have been terrified had I seen it in the movie theaters. I didn't see it until, oh my gosh, I was probably a teenager, which was in the 90s, before I actually saw it. I heard people talking about it, and then finally, I think I was at a friend's house and we rented it or something, and I watched it and I was like, oh my gosh. Majorly intense. Now let's talk about a couple of spin-offs. So there's this hidden gem that I found, and I didn't know existed. And it is called Room 237. Came out in 2012. It had a Rotten Tomatoes score of a 94. And it's an assessment of the film and its hidden meanings, about what I said, but by occultists, scholars, and mixes facts and fiction to decode hidden messages and symbols throughout the film. This film, I should say, I wouldn't call it a movie, it's like a documentary, but it kind of goes a little far-fetched into it. I took it as more as like just a fun kind of thing versus taking it too seriously. But yeah, it's like a little hidden gem, and it is called Room 237. I cannot remember honestly which streaming service I found it on. I found it on one of the streaming services, so you can pull up Alexa or Google and find out who's streaming it and give it a watch if you're interested. And now let's talk about 2019's Dr. Sleep, which Rotten Tomatoes gave a 78. So it's about grown-up Danny and his struggles with alcoholism and the traumas he faced when he was a child. He encounters a little girl with extraordinary abilities, much like his own. And together, they end up attracting a cult whose members feed off of their abilities that they call shining. And Danny and the girl, they have to, or the people that feed off of people that can shine, is what they call it. They feed off of them to try to become immortal. And so Danny and this little girl, they pair up together and they take down this nasty cult that is trying to feed off of people that have the same abilities called shining. It's creepy. It is slow. And the ending is disappointing. I will say that. I wasn't all impressed with Dr. Sleep. I was very disappointed by it. I think that they could have done so much more with the film than what they did. There's a scene in there that I particularly don't like. It made absolutely no sense to the rest of the movie. And it's where it's towards the end and Danny goes back to the Overlook. Now the Overlook's been shut down, but Danny and the little girl make their way to the hotel. He goes into the bar room. And in The Shining, his father, Jack, comes across the bartender. And that's where he really starts to lose his marbles, was when he starts to drink. In Dr. Sleep, the same thing happens to Danny, only the bartender he starts to think is there, and it is his father. But his father doesn't recognize him as his son. His father thinks that he is the bartender there and that he is someone else. But his name is still the same. It made no sense to me whatsoever that it needed to be in the film. It's like they just threw it in there for a time filler or something. Because when I seen it, I was like, what? Like, that doesn't even go with anything in this movie. It was just like an off-the-wall clip. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like, you know, did they cut out part of that to tie it into the movie in editing? Like, what's going on here? Like, it just didn't make any sense to me at all. And also, in my opinion, if they were going to have him go back to the Overlook, there is so much more that they could have done with it in the movie than what they did. There's hardly, yeah, just, it's bad. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. The acting's not all that great either. If it wasn't for the cult, the movie would be extremely boring. Extremely. Like, the cult is what made that movie interesting. And I feel like it shouldn't have been that way, because in the original Shining, all aspects of the film were interesting. But the Dr. Sleep was not directed by Kubrick. So, you know, there's that. But I just feel like they could have just done so much more with the film than what they did. It was disappointing. I would have given it a much lower rating than a 78, to be quite honest. I would give it maybe like 2 stars at the most. Just not very impressed with it. You can find it on streaming services. I think I've seen it on several different ones. But I'm telling you, I don't think that you're going to like it. I think you're going to be disappointed like I am. If it's one of those movies, though, that they tried to make it to where you could watch Dr. Sleep without having watched The Shining and know what's going on and understand it, but they failed. I feel like you have to watch The Shining before you watch Dr. Sleep to be able to understand the full story. Otherwise, if you don't, everything else in the movie will make sense except for the bar scene. Even though I watched The Shining and it still didn't make any sense to me, but you'll really be lost then. And you won't get the creepy factor from that part of Dr. Sleep, because you don't know who the bartender is supposed to be. So it takes away from that creepy aspect that they were trying to put out but miserably failed. Okay, that's going to wrap up this review. So, The Shining, like I said, I would give The Shining probably like a 4-star, definitely. It is definitely one of those horror films you could watch near Halloween. You could watch it also in the wintertime if you wanted to. Or watch it all year round if you wanted to. It is a great film. It's a classic. And that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified whenever I put out a new video. So I hope everyone is staying safe. And remember, my friends, stay spooky.